Welcome to our workshop offered by the University of Kentucky and the Work-Life Office and Benefits. Today, we're going to be talking about the fatherhood perspective, discipline without damage. This is a part of our parenting panel discussion for this month. And we are very excited to have four panelists with us today, and they bring various perspectives. They have children of various ages. And so I think you guys are really going to enjoy what they have to share with you today. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here with us. I'll allow you guys to introduce yourselves and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Azetta. So I just want to thank you all again for coming. This is David Weisenhorn, and you know what was interesting today? When I was fixing this slide, this first intro slide, I recognized that the last time that was updated was in March 19th of 2024. So this same group of men that I'm with today, honored to be here with today, have been working on the fatherhood perspective, coming a couple of times a year to talk about different aspects of parenting and specifically how it relates to us as fathers. I'm always excited because what I typically find is there's more women that attend this than males, and so I think it's healthy in so many ways that women get to hear that the men's perspective, and that can be helpful outside of their own husband's or partner's perspective. And so it is, I think, incredibly helpful. And so I'm glad you all are here. I'm going to do a real brief introduction of my panelists. They might not know that. And can you see that slide? Do you guys get to see that? Okay, cool. So we have with us Tyrone Atkinson. He's a program coordinator too in the Department of Family and Consumer Sciences Extension. He and I get to work together on multiple different events, but just a wonderful friend. All of these panelists are dear friends of mine as well as colleagues. And I think that really it says an additional piece because I value their input. We have grown in our families together through our parenting and have not only worked together in the university, but outside the university, which has added, excuse me, so much depth to my journey as a father. And so I'm excited to share with them today. We've got Dr. Conrad Davies. He's the founder and executive director of Be Reconciled. He's also an author of, I think, two books now. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, Dr. Davies. But again, I should go back. Tyrone is a father of a young boy, soon to be a young man, working his way towards manhood. I believe Joshua, is he 12 or is he 11?
He's
11.
11.
I knew I was going to get that wrong. So he's an 11-year-old, like I said, well, a step away from being 30, I think. We have Dr. Conrad Davies, who is the father of three children, two boys and a girl, 15. The boys are 15, 13, and his daughter is 11. All of the men I'm going to introduce are married, by the way. I don't know that that is extremely important, but I will put that in there. I might be assumed, I think, for me. And then finally, not last but not least at all, I have Dr. Nathan Wood, who is a family science associate professor. He is also the director of the Couples and Family Therapy Program, the clinical director at the I-RAFT, which is Individual Relationship and Family Therapy. I think that's what that stands for here at, no, not even close. Hey, that was pretty good though,
It
right?
was. It was. Yeah. So individual relational and financial therapy.
Financial. Okay. I threw family in there. I thought, it might work. Financial therapy. Um, and he could share more about that. So these gentlemen that I share with you today, that bring to you today, that are going to share, not only have perspectives of their own families, but they also work in relationship to other families. Myself, David Weisenhorn, I'm in Family and Consumer Sciences Extension. My title is a Parenting and Child Development Specialist. And I have two children. I have one of each. I've got a daughter who is 15 years old and popping wheelies all over Lexington, and a son who is 13 who wants to be the man of the house at all. And for those of you that even dropped some chats in the box there, I my son is a strong-willed child. Nathan, I missed your children. He is a father of three children. And I have no idea what your oldest. I was going to say I was going to go somewhere like 23 to 19, but I think I'm probably really young on that. What's the age span of your children? Two
Yeah.
daughters and a son, I
Yep.
know.
Two daughters and
Son's
a
in the middle.
son. The oldest turns 30 this year. The baby just turned 23, and I have three grandbabies. So now,
So we bring to you a perspective of preteen, teens, post-teen, grandbabies. We cover the gamut here. We have cultural differences. We bring a lot, and so we're going to talk about some of those things as we continue our series. And so I'm going to kick it off, guys, with just and maybe I think Dr. Davies was saying Conrad was telling me this morning that he's feeling a little under the weather. So we're going to give him some early talking, and then if he chooses not to share later, that'll be on him. But so, Conrad, when you hear the word discipline, we're talking about disciplining without damaging. When you hear that word, many of us can think automatically we can go to punishment. I think a lot of times that term discipline and punishment are synonymous with each other in the minds of most. So, what comes to mind for you when you think of discipline from your own childhood?
Yeah, thanks, David. Hello, everyone. As David mentioned, I have three children, 15, 13, 11. And when this question about discipline comes up, I always have to translate it in my world when it comes towards my children. Because my world was, I grew up with West African parents. My parents are from a small country in Sierra Leone, in Western Africa, and they immigrated here in the 70s. Well, bringing a West African perspective brings a different dynamics from this Western culture here in US. And so discipline for me was education. Um, Definitely was highly important. Uh, a C as in Charlie was like an F in my household. And so we all had high marks in school. Um, it's very patriarchal in the sense of the West African male leads the family, holistically, where it's a whatever my dad sort of desired, that's what we did. It was very collective. And so the collective looked like, well, some of you may have, if you heard another um, parenting seminar, all of us have chemistry degrees. My dad was a chemist. He had three chemistry degrees, while my sister has two. I have one, and my little brother has two. My brother got the highest. He got a PhD in biochemistry. So he pushed us all in the same direction. We were all college athletes. And my dad was a high level soccer player for his home country. And so I played soccer in college. My little brother played soccer in college, and so did my sister. She was she did track and field. Reason why I'm sharing all that story is that coming from a collective context, the idea of discipline was you just don't mess with dad. And dad is the one who determined and dictated the framework. So what that looks like for me now with my children, that was my training was very universal. We all did chemistry, we all did sports, and that was his idea for success as an immigrant coming to the US. So he pushed us to do well. We had to survive. It was almost, I think some of it was rooted out of his own fears, but that's how he pushed us. And so we were afraid of our dad, for the most part. For my children, it's a little different. I'm looking for their uniquenesses, and we'll probably get to more detailed questions, but I'm looking for their uniquenesses of who they are and training them according to who they are and how they're wired and how our kids function. And so I'll comment more on that later. But discipline for me growing up was really about universal themes of what my dad expected for all of us to do.
So there was a real patriarchal kind of leadership, and dad kind of had the final say. Dad was bringing that. So when you think about how that shifted or modeled for you, like what you said you feared dad. I think of a verse that I like to hold on to, or that says that the fear of the father is the beginning of wisdom. Did you find that as like this idea that dad was wise in it? It was important for me. I valued what he brought, and so my fear of him was more of like a respect for him, or did you fear him because he was violent or hurtful?
Both,
Yeah.
both. So I remember a time as a I haven't thought about this in so long, but I remember I was a curious child, and so I there was a knife that I had, and it had a wooden handle, and for whatever reason, I put it in the oven. I don't know why. Um, and so my dad was trying to get ready to make something or whatever else, preheated the oven, and he's smelling something, and he sees this knife in the oven. Well, the first thing that happened was he quickly went to the room, woke me up, and I got some nice whelps on my backside for all of that. And so the thought was of course I did something wrong in that particular case, but it was if something went wrong, uh, Dad was he was a strong man, a big man. Um, I was going to get hurt. So there's a physical fear because he was an intimidating, very deep voiced person. And then there was a respect. To this day, some of the things when I look back, I honor my dad's work he did in my life, where
Mm.
sometimes I would sit on the couch and listen to him talk about stories from back home for 2, 3 hours. And I would just kind of sit and enjoy those moments where I just loved his stories. And here I am, a third culture kid growing up in the United States, didn't really know Sierra Leone, and I was so absorbed by those things. Or to see a man start from zero and work his way up to work and get more schooling and get us through school. I just respected all of that. So there's a both and. I was afraid of him physically because he could hurt me. And I got some good whoopings. And then I also respected him for his world and what he did, what he did in my life. So it was both. I
Yeah,
had to,
thank
and
you.
it triggered a lot.
That was, I think that when I hear that story, Conrad, I think a lot about the the response I get from family members that say, "I was spanked and I turned out fine," like, and they use that oftentimes as the the rationale behind endorsing that same behavior. Like, hey, the reason I spank my kids is because I was spanked and I turned out fine. And one of the things I typically say to parents or just to individuals that might respond that way to me when I say I don't think that that's a healthy way to move forward with children. And my thought is you would probably be just as respectable and as a good child without that spanking. And so I wonder, Tyrone, do you have how is this similar in just hearing that story? Are there similarities that you had in your childhood? And Conrad, I'll let you come back to this. I'll let you come in and answer this whenever you have that opportunity to speak again. Is just are there things that you would do different or do different in your home um, as a father than your father did as a result of the way you were treated or disciplined? So I want to jump to, yeah, Tyrone, I'm going to let you speak to that, and then I'll come back to you, Conrad.
Great question. Can you all hear me okay? David, I think that's a great question. And Conrad, thank you for sharing. I would say, and to not be long-winded, I think I've learned to give my parents and even my father a lot of grace because we truly don't know what we don't know, right? My dad didn't have a dad growing up. He didn't have his dad died very early on, into before I was even born. So in the way that I realized that my dad parented me was just from his context, but also out of survival, right? Like I look at a lot of things in the ways we grew up. Um, I think my dad was just trying to learn how to survive his world. And now that I am a parent of my son and I'm learning that really, and I've had a lot of parenting fails, and I know we all do, right? But I think self-awareness has become the greatest indicator of how I can be the best parent for my son. And it helps to have someone there. So I gladly highlight my wife in being and holding me accountable a lot of times. But I realized that there's a lot of my dad in me, and I can sometimes influence the way I parent Joshua based upon the way I've seen things, but I also need to become more self-aware. When I think about even discipline in itself, nothing about discipline is really fun. Right? Like there's days that I want to eat cake every day, or my son wants to eat ice cream, right? But we know if I eat those things every day, that's not good discipline for my body. It's not overall. And I think discipline in a sense is being for me personally, that coming into a greater self-awareness is saying, hey, I don't have to try to parent him based upon the way that I was parented, nor do I have to not parent him based upon the way I was parented. But I need to learn what's best for him. And that's why I like what Conrad said, learning his uniqueness, right? Learning who my son is and how I can help him best be who he is supposed to be in the world. And I think that is more than just, the issues of, is this punishment or is this for his betterment? But it's more of who is this young man trying to be and how can I help him be the best version of himself. But in that, I have to be becoming, in a sense, actively becoming the best version of who I am to help him be that, if that makes
And
sense.
I love so much of the things you said. One is we don't know what we don't know. So I heard in that there is some grace. Man, wow, what a strong word for your father in the ways that he fell short, right? Because
Yeah.
he didn't know, right? I think of my own father that way, who didn't have a mother, um, and how he fell short a lot of times.
Yeah.
Um, and just you said your wife helps hold you accountable. Could you speak to what that might look like, how that looks in your relationship? What's that look like?
So, and this is my son, and I may have said this in the last. So he's my buddy. His nickname is Bud. I'm probably giving way much information, but he believes that I'm his best friend and his mom is his mom. So even in interactions, like, cause I'll play video games with him, and he was a COVID baby, so he did kindergarten from the screen, right? So we were home. He's the only child, and we spent a lot of time together, which I think he took to me. And now I look back and I'm like, man, I'm so grateful that he values me enough to want me to be in his world all the time. And I think understanding. Going back, I got lost in. Say your question one more time, David, so I can make sure I'm saying the right thing.
I think I was asking how your wife holds you accountable. You
Yes,
talked about
yes,
her holding you
I was getting
accountable.
there.
What's that
Yes,
look
so
like?
sorry. Yes,
Okay.
because there are times when we argue and bicker, even if it's fun, but he's more quickly to talk back to me because not that he doesn't revere me, but I think because he feels lost in our dynamic, because he sees me as his compadre more than his authoritative voice. And I think sometimes we have this interaction, and my wife will tell me all the time. She says somebody has to get off the exit. This is her favorite way of saying, like, we'll go at it about anything. It could be basketball, it could be just getting home, and her that holding accountable is like, hey, somebody has to stop. You don't have to keep going down this road because there's nothing positive coming out of the interaction that you are having. And it's not because we get into it, but I think I feel like some of that context that he missed from having a sibling. Like I grew up, I had a brother, and siblings just have a way of like, hey, hush, don't do this. Or you learn cues from your siblings. I think he didn't get all of those cues. So sometimes he doesn't understand what's healthy and what's okay, I'm going too far with that. I need to fall back into this. And I think some of the ways that, that accountability is for me to say, okay, you need to take off this bro hat and actually be daddy, but you also have to do it in a wise way and not get upset if he's not receptive to when you switch.
Man, I like that. I was thinking about that, and it sounded like there, you said I'm his bud, and at times that relationship, maybe that identity at times becomes a tripping point, and your wife is like, "Yo, hey, at some point you got to stop being the buddy and be the dad, and do some things a little different." And I love that because in that I hear maybe you being much different than the way your dad was. And like, hey, while my father had really good attributes, I really wanted it to be different in my parenting, and I want to be more relational in the way am my relationship with my son. And perhaps there's going to be a lot of value in that, and I hope we get to that. It's funny because my son too doesn't have an older brother. I had four older brothers, so I got a lot of wedgies, a lot of noogies. So my little bald spot right there, that was for my brothers. I feel certain. Um, and so there was even a time when my son, he just doesn't get picked on enough. You know what I mean? And so I'll tell you a funny story. One morning he just got finished making his bagel, and I was getting ready to leave the house, and I mean, listen, it takes him 15 minutes to put cream cheese on that thing. And he had spread it all up. And dude, I just walked right out the door, snatched that thing up, took a bite, and rolled on out. He was so upset, and I was like, you know what? He doesn't have an older brother, so sometimes I got to fill that role too. Anyway, Nate, uh, Nate, I love that you have been patient and quiet. There's a lot I want to ask you. You bring a lot of value to this group in the sense that you get to do it again. Some of the things that I really want to pull out of what I heard from Conrad and Tyrone is the fact, and I really want to offer this to everybody listening, is that parenting is a skill. Like I told you, my daughter's 15, so she's popping wheelies all over town and scaring me to death, right? That you don't come into the world at 15, you just don't now all of a sudden know how to drive. Just like when we have children, we don't automatically just know how to parent. And so falling down is such a part of that. I think the statistics are everybody has two accidents in their lifetime. So if you're listening and you haven't done that, they're coming for you. No, I'm just kidding. You've either done well and dodged the bullet. So I know that there's going to be an accident headed my way in that. But when we think about parenting, for some reason, we don't seem to approach that with that same level of grace. We were talking a lot about grace and how do we extend that grace to ourselves? And I think a lot of times that gift of grace comes as a grandparent. And so I know you've got both roles. And so I would love to hear that at some point. I don't want to direct too much of how you respond because there've been some questions about what are we got growing up? What does discipline even mean to us? But you're welcome to take this in any room. You can talk through a grandparent perspective, maybe what you learned or how your discipline has shifted as your children have gotten older. You have young adults in your life now who also you've got, your parents of parents. So I'm gonna hush and let you talk.
Okay. All right. Uh, I'm not sure where to start. Okay, so first of all, thanks. I've enjoyed hearing the Conrad and Tyrone, your perspectives, and David, yours as always. I think for me, of course, being a professor, I have to, push up my glasses, be my little nerd myself here. I actually, no lie, I looked up the etymology of discipline this morning in preparation for this. And it shares the same root word as disciple. Um, like I teach in a discipline, so like this idea of discipline and that, yeah, the knee-jerk reaction is always think about, okay, like spanking or no spanking or, but I think for me now, if I could be nerdy about it, is like discipline ideally is a way to guide to keep people or keep kids not on a tightrope, but more of a street. Like, here's the boundaries. As long as you're walking that way within these things, you're okay, Um, and I think but that's the ideal. When my kids were younger, it is so hard to keep the big picture in mind. Like the moment it feels so big. And then we get our egos involved. And it's like any teaching or guiding just kind of goes out the window. It's like, no, you're going to listen to me because, I'm dad. Like there's no teaching in that. Like there's no, like if we think about discipline as like a practice, like, here's a set of values and beliefs and decisions and behaviors that create, this is that create, I'm a little lost for words, but anyway, yeah, that's the hard part, is keeping that big picture in mind. As far as the grandparent side of things, well, first of all, they're spoiled rotten. That's the best part about being a grandpa. But two, watching your children parent has been really rewarding and all eye-opening because where they learned how to be a parent. That's by watching my wife and I. And there's some moments where my wife and I are like high-fiving on our way home after visiting the kids, and other times we're like, oh, yep, okay. And we know where that one came from. But it's yeah, I'm still right now, I'm figuring out, okay, what is my role as a grandpa when my 3-year-old is at the house
Mm,
and her parents are right there. So
mm,
it's a learning experience for me because I'm not her mom and dad. Do I undercut mom and dad to get her to like me a little bit more at the risk of my daughter being really not pleased with me?
mm.
So I think there's how do I support my children as parents and at times kind of being redirecting grandbabies. Yes. Anyway, that's
I love so much of what you're saying,
yeah.
Nate. I feel like I could just say a bazillion things. You started with what I love, which is like, hey, what is discipline? It comes from the Latin root
Yeah.
disciplinia. It
You have to
leads
get it.
and
You have to
lends
push
it.
up your glasses when you do that.
Yeah, lends itself to, yeah, it lends itself to this idea that Dr. Russell Barkley talked about. And he says there's two types of parents, the two types of what he saw is these two parenting methodologies. It's either the engineer parent, which I know you can relate to deeply, is the sense that, hey, this is what I created. This is me. This is a mini me that's walking around, and therefore any perfection or flaw is a direct reflection on me as a parent. And many parents can do that. And if you think about that, the discipline becomes much harsher. Or he says there's another method, which is more of like this shepherding idea. This that I'm going to be leading them into rich environments, that I'm going to protect and help them overcome challenges with this crazy crook that I have, that I'm going to be the one that leads into this space. But again, appreciating the individuation of each child, this idea that there's more medical studies of an N of one than any other medical studies recorded, that we are very unique and wonderfully made. So I love that perspective of discipline and how that meets that parenting perspective. When you were parenting, though, did you find, and you said, I can sometimes see them parent well, and we're, popping collars over here because that's a direct reflection on high five and like, hey, we did this, look at this. Were there times though that you begin to say, hey, I really messed up? Like maybe recount a time to me, to us, to the audience, and it doesn't have to
one
be
one
the worst.
one quick story, and it's legend in my house. Like it still gets brought up.
It's what I
Like
want to hear. Legend.
it still gets brought up. I don't know what, a decade and a half later. Um, so my son, so the three kids, the daughters are about 3 years apart, and then about 4 years between the middle daughter and my son. So he was 10-ish or so. So this is 13 years ago. He was 10-ish or so, and he just started to have just this lovely odor about him. And he needed to take a shower or a bath. And he just, he is a strong-willed kid anyway, but he just dug in his heels. And like, I finally told him, like, Spence, you get in the shower now, or I'm putting you in the shower. And the shampoo's like strawberries. So we're going to go up there. And even if you're in your clothes, we're going to get. So, and the part that I'm regretting, well, first of all, so I'm physically carrying my 10-year-old son, who was, my son now is about 6'4", 250, like DN kind of, he's a big kid. So he was a pretty big kid. So I'm physically carrying my 10-year-old up the stairs. and he's screaming, I don't want to smell like strawberries. Um, and I regret, and my wife and daughters were in our bedroom and they're dying laughing like at this. And I regret that so much. And I've apologized to Spencer so many times since then. What I regret about it is I was angry. I'm not a yeller, but it's like there was fire in my eyes, and I know there was. And what I regretted was that I physically took control of him as a 10-year-old out of anger. He does not remember it that way. It's like I said, it's legend in the house. So occasionally somebody will still say, I don't want to smell like strawberries. I mean, yeah, it's a thing, but yeah, that's a do-over for me. I think what the do-over would be to just take that deep breath and calm myself. I probably still would have carried him up the stairs. I still would have said, you're going to smell like strawberry. I mean, all of that would have been the same, but it was, I got hyper focused on, no, you're going to do what I want you to do. And I was mad about it. But yeah, I think
I
for
relate
me,
to that.
yeah, it's about, we all make mistakes as parents and especially, as dads. And I think the secret for me over time I've learned is it's not about that moment. It's like, it's what's the conversation look like after that moment?
Mm,
It's like, you know what, son, I shouldn't have yelled like that, or I shouldn't have been that angry when we did that. Like,
mhm.
can can I do that repair and then try to do better?
Man, so good. I feel like I know the gentlemen that are on this call, so I feel like I can speak for you guys in this term, and I don't like to do that most other times, but I feel that we've all, in some way, let our anger get away with us when it comes to how we discipline our children. And I was thinking about that. You said two things. One, I put here on the screen what actually discipline in action looks like and
Mhm.
how much we expect our children to behave in a way that oftentimes is difficult for us to behave. And, and that expectation a lot of times can drive an ego, can drive an anger. There's a story I heard, and maybe you all have heard some of this, about a community. There was a town that had strict rules on how people were to behave. And one day they brought a woman into the town who had had adultery, and there was a bunch of people standing around, and they were going to stone this woman because of what she had done. And there was a wise man that walked into that group of that into that town, and he began to get low. He knelt down and began drawing in the sand, and that did one thing, a couple of things. One, he reduced himself to this person that had already felt guilt and shame. They'd done something wrong. It was known by the community. And he got down on his knee and he started scribbling in the sand. And when he did that, it drew the attention off of the person. And the the response of the man was, he who hasn't messed up, throw the stone. And everybody dropped stones and left, and had an opportunity to maybe punish this person for what they had done, chose to simply say, don't do it again, with a lot of grace. And I think at times when our children mess up, we are like that town's community, and we want to go by the rules. There was an interview with um, Oprah Winfrey, and she was interviewing Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. And she said to him, or asked the question, what would be the most important information you could give to parents? And his response was to remember what it was like to be a child. And I think That's what I hear when I hear your story is that, man, I wish I could go back and just apologize. Just say, hey, I'm sorry because I let the anger get away with me. And I think many of us let our anger, and I don't think that's unique to men. However, a lot of times society can celebrate that anger in certain ways that makes us kind of puff up and use it as a weapon at times and then justify our actions. But our children need much different than that. They need that respect, which I think is oftentimes respect is when we mess up, we acknowledge that and then come back and say, hey, I messed up, man. I'm sorry, just as you did. So I think that was amazing when you did that. We're talking about this. I recognize that the hour has flown by. Conrad, I want to come back to you. What discipline strategies have you found that are effective with your children? And I'm going to make this multifold. What are they and have they changed? What is unique? Are they the same? These effective strategies, are they the same for all of your children, or have you found unique effective strategies for each one? Why, how you found them? Give me some info on that, but allow some of our panelists some more time too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Earlier, when I was kind of thinking through the conversation, I was reminded of a story of there was a time I was going to spank one of my sons, and going off of my story where I received certain spankings, and then I was sort of repeating it. And I just had this intuitive, very deeply convicting thought that said, "Do not spank this child." And it just sort of, it's like everything in me just sort of dropped with compassion. Anything, I mean, any frustration, anger, irritation, annoyance, all of it I felt the drop. All of that just kind of fell off, and I just kind of looked at this child. It was an academic issue, and I was frustrated because it was like there's no change in the academic story for this child. But what I remembered though was that this the moment of all the pressure inside of my body releasing and saying, I can't spank this child. And I just kind of talked to him a certain way. Well, that very child, what's interesting, all the academic challenges we've had with him have changed over the years. And I mean, to the point where he didn't do well in school, and everything in me wanted to sort of just beat it out of him, to be honest with you. I was just thinking, what in the world is this child doing? Keep in mind, I was pushed a certain way academically. There's a certain way school's supposed to be. And it was fascinating is that when he bottomed out, he failed a lot of courses. Something happened inside of him to now he is doing exceptionally well. Um, and we're all like, my wife and I are like, what in the world has happened with this child? But it's almost like he had to go through a moment where I had to let him fail. I just had to let him fail early. Had let him fail early instead of trying to preserve and trying to keep him and trying to make sure, oh no, it's a reflection on us. Here's Dr. Conrad and his brilliant wife, and here they've got a child that is failing school. We had to let go and say, okay, you need to take responsibility for this. And we had to sort of bear the weight of him going through his journey. So, with that in mind, we've had to learn over time that there's a certain way he's wired, this child. I'll be quick on the other two. My other son, what's interesting about him, he's our most studious child. And school's never really been a major issue for him. Other things, we tell him what to do, he'll respond. But for him, he needs a lot of example. He needs just a lot of conversations that really help him understand what's happening. He doesn't need he already watches and observes. He's already attuned to his other siblings and attuned to the frameworks of the house, and he kind of knows certain things, and he picks up stuff without us even teaching him. And so, a lot of example is important for him, and just establishing frameworks. And then my other child, what's interesting, for her, she needs a lot of presence. She's highly relational, highly connective. I can sit and just have a conversation and say, hey, come to the store with me. We'll get in the car, jump, run to Kroger, and we'll just have a conversation and talk through stuff. And she gets it. But then she's very intuitive. And so her learning doesn't come always by hey, go do this, she's responsive, she's obedient to that. But she's highly intuitive where there's things she picks up intuitively. So I've had to do a lot of creative ways of training her and welcoming her to intuitively pick up things, which is a more of an environmental type training. To say, okay, we're going to create an environment for you to go learn and discover and learn things in life, and do things in song and creation and playful. Sometimes when if I'm teaching her math, I'll have a Scottish accent and she'll speak in an English British accent and we'll do math in a Scottish British conversation and she gets it, which is fun. But to the point of your question, they're all so different and they all pick up and embrace things differently. So we just had to learn to be creative in that way. Though there's this kind of static traditional training that we both came from, we've had to sort of translate and say, you know what, this is about them being trained and not about us reliving a life we've already lived in that stage of life. It's about them being trained. And so we've had to be other centered to see them grow in their own ways and us adjust accordingly.
Man, I love that. I love the individual touches you took, the silliness that dads are just known for, the Scottish accent. I think you should do a little right now. No, I'm just kidding. I saw Nate loving that, dude. He was down there really digging that. Nate must do that at his house too, kilt and all, I'm sure. I want. There was another, and there's another quote. It sounds to me, Conrad, when I hear you talk, you really come with a level of discipline yourself, and just hearing how you were reflecting on this desire. Maybe that ego was like, man, we're going to get this out of them. Maybe that past experience of like, hey, this is how dad handled it. I'm dad now. I should handle it like dad handled it. I'm going to spank it out of my son. Um, I think those are real thoughts, man. I appreciate the courage and the bravery to have on this call in front of, in the public to say those things. I know I have felt that. I know I have experienced that. Tyrone, I want to jump to you because I think about a book that you and I read together. In one of the book, it was called The Light, and I want to give this to people. It was called The Road Less Traveled. It's by Dr. Scott Peck, and it's written in 1978. Listen, if you're going to get a parenting book, go back, go get a book that's been around a long time because it really tells the tale of time. This book really talks about three main aspects: discipline, love, and grace, and how to parent with those three things. But the first one is discipline. And one of the first lines in the first, I mean, it's the first, I know it's got to be the first paragraph of the book. And it says, you cannot discipline from a place of undiscipline. It's only derived from discipline yourself. I talked to a colleague just yesterday and we were talking about this idea of, man, I don't know if it's me not being like, if it's my inability to manage the situation, or is it their inability to do what I'm asking them to do. And I think at times it comes from that sense of, am I disciplined? Tyrone, talk to me about some of the things that you have found to be effective in gaining that. You also told me one most important thing, and I'm going to hold that for a while, and maybe you'll share it because I really, when you said it to me about the thing I needed most as a parent, man, it was like gold. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, I'll remind you. But speak from that space of discipline and how you've come to a place of discipline.
Thank you, brother. Well, this is the place where I can sign off and tell you all I have nothing good to say. I am not a disciplined person by nature. So this is the hardest part of my parenting journey, if we're being honest. I am not a person who enjoys discipline, which is why I brung it up, or a disciplined lifestyle. I like to eat what I want to eat. I want to, I want to. Let me be clear, and I'm being funny, but I'm also being very honest. When we first had our son, I didn't understand, right? I had never had a baby before, didn't remember being a baby, but my wife was very adamant about him keeping his schedule. Even as a newborn, I would stay up.
We lost your volume, buddy.
I'm so sorry. You can't hear me? Can you hear me? I'll speak up. Can we good? I was saying as Joshua was a newborn, I would not submit to his sleep schedule. And that was me in my mind being the dad, like he's gonna adjust to me. And I think I always carried this mentality that he's going to adjust to me, not me to him. And I think that from that moment, even as a newborn, I failed to see that parenting was less about me trying to establish a routine for him. It was more about me understanding how to establish my routine with his, right? And I would find myself in the middle of the night not being helpful because I'm falling asleep at the moments where she's up at 2 and 5 in the morning trying to feed him, and I'm dead tired because I stayed up the whole time. And that is just an example. And I have to go back because my wife will tell you I've apologized for many years now that I realized, but that is kind of the point of my parent. I realized that was me and myself not understanding what it meant to be disciplined.
Man,
Because as a go ahead, David. Nope.
come on.
I was gonna say I think as a man and as a father, when we have these connotations that oh everybody needs to submit to my lifestyle, or my son or my kids need to do what I want them to do, we're not giving space to understand and learn how to live with them. And I think that's just an example. And I say that because I'm not necessarily, I had to learn as he got older, we would get made fun of by some of our friends that, oh, he has to be in bed. We were very strict. My wife is very strict about his bedtime. 7:30, 8:30, we're going to bed. Oh, people want to hang out? Nope, we're not going. He's going to bed. And I'm like, and I used to push back against that a lot, not understanding now that was for his benefit. While other people were laughing, now we realize why other kids are tired. All of the people we hung out with, they're sick. They stay sick because they're not putting them in a place of discipline to help them, not necessarily the punishment, but in a routine to be healthy.
Tyrone, I love what you said, man. I'm just going to because the reason I love it, you told me, you said the best thing our kids could be, the thing they need most from you, David, is a healthy dad.
Yeah.
And man, that's tough. Man, the what I heard you say though was all about discipline. What we talk about life balance, right? You talked about balancing, and that balancing really is under that realm of discipline. What you were talking about was developing flexibility to handle conflicting needs. You were having that need, like, I need to stay up and do me. And your son was like, I need you to be awake and do me. Right. And so that was the conflicting need. And then the balancing comes when knowing when to let go of old patterns. And that's
Yeah.
what you did, dude. Like it comes to that crashing point that it's like, okay, here are conflicting needs. I need some time. And I think at times parenting, our frustrations are those conflicting needs, those needs that my kids need me right now, but man, everything in me needs some David time. Like I need some selfishness, right? And it's time to let go of that. Man, it is a dying to self process. That's that selfless nature of a parent. And so when it feels like you're dying, my goodness, man, acknowledge it, extend grace to yourself because by all means, you are dying. You are
Yeah.
dying to yourself. And that is that death of the flesh, that death of the old man, that moving into this parenting role. So, man, you couldn't have said it any better. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Nate, I want to jump in. I know we're coming on that. Don't you pop in on me yet? Is I want Nate to talk. Nate, we're talking so much about the role and the explanation, how discipline plays into that. You talked a lot about modeling. Uh, how much of discipline is that delay of self, but how much of it is modeling? How much of what you found in your role is how to model discipline?
Ah, you know, uh, like it's really easy to kind of armchair quarterback or Monday morning quarterback this because my kids are all grown. If I really sit and think, okay, was I asking myself that question when they were younger. We were in survival, like, survive. But in hindsight, um, I think the for me, my wife Maggie and I, we had a lot of conversations between the two of us about what does a good child look like. Um, and and for us, it we came to this idea for us anyway, is like a good kid is someone who sees others, hears others, and is kind and respectful. Like, even if they didn't believe the same things we believed in, like that, we weren't even like, are you, are our kids gonna, what is it? What's the values essentially that we wanted to, we had a lot of conversations about that. And that's something very important to Maggie and I. And so as far as like, we tried to lead through example in that way, and in those kind of conversations around the dinner table. Like, we had my son-in-laws get a little shocked when they hear about the conversations we would have at dinner, because there was no topic off limits during our dinners. And my wife was very big on, we had, speaking to Tyrone's point about structure, 5 or 5:30, it was family dinner every night. Not just Sunday, it was every night. If you miss dinner, something, you better be dead. Like, there was just some of those, like, you're going to be at dinner, but all topics were on the table for discussion, and creating empathy and all. Anyway, so I know we're done on time,
No,
but
listen, I love that because I think that's really important. I think that's important. When you said we spent a lot of time identifying what kind of child do we want to see, man, that that's the end game, right? I mean, that's the long game.
yeah.
How much, let me ask you this, how much did community play a part in parenting your children?
That's a um that's a really long story. I think part of it, we actually struggled with that. So, like, we had community when we're from, both of us are from the West, and like Idaho, Utah. And when we moved to Kentucky, we were the only members of either one of our families out here. So we were kind of on our own. And it wasn't a great, like, our church community, you think, these communities that would always be there for you. It was not a great experience. And so I think in some ways it forced us even to hunker down even more.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, we really, like, I think that's part of the reason we had those conversations, is like, okay, what do we value? What, and when, like, the kids have very different interests. I mean, like, I want to echo, like, everybody else. It's like, we had a value system we wanted our children to have. That's just basic humanity, is what we would consider basic humanity. But they're all very different people for sure. But yeah, I wish we would have had a stronger community. But we felt we felt a little bit more isolated, I think, than we
Now,
would
but your children were how old when you moved here? How old were they already?
have. They were 5, 8.5-ish, and 11 or 12.
So go back before you moved here. How much did community influence your parenting? Maybe not directly, but and the reason
Oh,
I ask this question is because I found it helpful for me when before Ellen and I had children, we saw couples that had really cool kids. I found cool kids that I was like, I want to know who their parents are because that's the kind of kids that I want to have. And then I met their parents and really just asked them tons of questions about parenting. And maybe that just speaks, and this is long before, I mean, I wasn't in this role, not even close to this role. at that time, and thinking this was important to me that I wanted to have good kids. And so I wanted to find children that I thought were good and then talk to their parents so I could emulate some of the things. I wanted to hear some secrets. How much did your community before moving here impact the way or influence the way in which you parented?
Yeah, so I'm the youngest of 6 kids by 10 years. My wife's the youngest of 5 kids by about 9 years. Um, we have 25-ish nieces and nephews on either side. Um, and so I grew up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so Mormon, the nickname. So there was no shortage of kids around. Like there were kids everywhere. But I think the faith tradition and some of those faith ideas, I think were foundational uh, for
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Azetta, I know that it is the 1 o'clock hour.
Yep.
We can keep going, and if people want to bounce out, they can.
I thank you all. Thanks, David, Azetta. Thanks for the opportunity. I have a half-mile walk to my next meeting, so I gotta bounce. And thank you all. Conrad, nice to meet you. Tyrone, nice to see you again.
Nate, you're a gem. Thanks for being here, man.
Yep.
I want to open it up for questions. I know there may be questions. I'm not in a hurry. I don't know. I don't know if my other panelists are, but by all means, if you have questions, let's hear them. If we can be helpful, or if you want to make a comment or something you learned, whatever. Nothing. We'll keep going. So Tyrone, Conrad, do you have how much would you say? Well, you can answer that last question. What were some of the impact? How much one is modeling have to do with discipline in your family, and then are there you see, um, and then how much did community or does community impact influence? I think a lot of times the reason I like that question, I mean, I'm just going further. The reason I want to know about your influences is because there's a lot. I think a lot of times when we parent, we can look external and say, "Man, why am I the one that's having to hold ground here when my kids come home and say, well, no one else is doing that, Dad. No one else is doing this." Some of that is just the child's perspective, but some of that is that I don't see my parenting style reflected a lot in the communities in which I'm involved. So what are some of the impacts that you guys have had, and where have you found strength in learning to parent?
Well, I'll say this. We have a couple that's in our world. They've been married for about 45-ish years, and they've got kids that are in our demographics. In their mid 40s, they have kids themselves, so they're grandparents, of course. And what's always been interesting is that this older couple that are now in their 70s, they will tell us some of the horror stories that they haven't even told their own children when they were in their 30s and 40s and learning how to parent. And they've become a gift to us when they talked about how they wrestled, how sometimes they'd leave their kids in the house, go out in the car, and they would just talk out a matter and talk it out until they came to a conclusion to say, okay, this is how we're going to lead this child. Because the child had a certain response. The child was of age to know that I'm going to get punishment, but mom and dad are going to have to work it out. And so this couple, older couple, said, yeah, we would go in a car and we would spend maybe sometimes 30 minutes to an hour talking through the issue, the matter, and what we're going to do about this child's behavior, decisions they made, or whatever. And many, many other stories they tell about the to what to what Nate kind of talked about. I think it was just talking it out. There's something about talking it out with his wife, and that's something that Candace, my wife, and I've had to kind of walk through. It's like, how do we, because she brought a perspective that I didn't have, and then I brought a perspective. And so we found ourselves realizing, okay, sometimes we had to talk through what's the real problem here? Is the problem something that are we responsive out of our emotion, meaning that this child did something that is alarming and now we're actually operating in fear? Or are we responding out of fear, or is there actually a real problem?
Mm,
We had to kind of isolate what's the real problem,
mm,
and not the problem in the moment that we perceive, but more so, could it have been a training issue on our part that
mm,
the child just doesn't know? They weren't trained.
mm.
And so having to go back and sort of unravel that and have a simple conversation for the sake of training. And then from that point of training, then there could be standards established for them because if they didn't have it in them, they didn't have it in them. So they were just responding out of default. And now we're responding out of emotion and we're wanting to do something about something that they had not been trained in. So we had to go back to train them and give them opportunity to learn and grow and make decisions based on parameters and frameworks. But we had to wrestle through that. And that's to this day still hard. But it's the unity between my wife and I has had to increase as our kids have gotten older and as we've gotten older in our marriage, to increase in learning how to find that unity and welcome each other's perspective so that we can parent together. And that's been a journey. It's been a long journey, but it's been a journey.
Man,
So
what beautiful story. So something that you found modeled in another couple that then you adopted and said, "Hey, we want to use this." And man, I tell you, the wisdom in what you just shared was amazing. One, because children are coming from a place of they lack understanding. They have impulse control issues, right? Like they're unable to do the things that a lot of times we expect or desire from them. They can't behave the way that we want them to behave. So there is that learning process. So I appreciate you highlighting the fact that my kids have to learn. And also that my emotions can take over and I might respond in a way that's really not appropriate at all. And I know I'm 100% guilty of this in saying that my wife and I need to sometimes take time away, right? Because I think a lot of times as parents we want to correct the action immediate. We have an immediacy in our culture that just says, "Hey, we need to respond right now. The faster the better." And what I hear you saying is that there was massive benefit in taking time away to kind of hash out what is the behavior, what has us upset, what do we believe as a unit, what are our values in our family, and then how can we help child. Maybe it's the reason they're responding this way is our lack of teaching to begin with. Man, I love that, dude. That is fantastic. What rich and depth of knowledge that you have, man. Thank you for sharing that, Conrad. Tyrone, you've got something you want to share?
It's a lot of thoughts, man. I'll be kind of short. I'm sitting here thinking, man, this is such a great conversation, and I feel like we didn't even get to touch even get deep at all with the time we had. I'm I, when we even think about behave, like that in itself has a common connotation, right? Like when I'm saying I want my son to behave a certain way, I think behaving, and sometimes I can get that mixed up, or it's always about how other people are going to view what my son does and how I'm going to perceive that other people feel about how I parent.
Mm,
So I think sometimes when I'm more concerned about how he behaves, I'm less likely to let him explore his world
mm,
because I'm trying to control things. And I feel some of the lessons that I'm learning as of late is that like I'll give an example. My son was had a sleepover for his 11th birthday. And the last couple of times he's had his friends over, and we have a upstairs, you can hear him kind of saying, "Hey, don't do this, don't touch, or don't do this, or my dad is going to get upset if something happens." And my wife brought it to my attention, and I didn't realize the way he treats his friends when he's over. It's not because he's not a good kid. He's an amazing kid, but it's because I've drilled into him some things that maybe weren't even necessary. I've harped on them for so long that now he's repeating those
mm,
things. Instead of giving him an opportunity to explore and have safety, now he's enforcing and being authoritative to his friends. And I realized that, man, those are some times that I need to learn to fall back. I may be
mm,
doing too much. Yes, I want him to take the trash out. No, he doesn't have to do it the exact way that dad does it. Because as I'm teaching him, I want him to, be efficient, right? I want to just show him the process of how to do things efficiently. But when I want him to be efficient, I'm lacking in allowing him to explore, to be creative. So
Hmm.
that's what I appreciated about what Conrad was saying earlier. I think we just have to be mindful because that can happen on any given day. If I come home tired from work, I'm going to less likely let him explore. I'm going to be more corrective instead of loving. If I'm actually stressed out or going through my own difficulties, sometimes I'm not as mindful to let him just be himself and explore. And I think going back to your question that you asked, Conrad, our village plays a very big role in that. When I see our friends, because we are transplants too, from Louisville, but we have no blood family here in Lexington. But all of our village here consists of our friends that we've built over time,
Hmm.
right? So we now get to glean from each other as we all have found that we are raising our kids and have different ages, but we get to glean from each other and hold each other accountable. And it's helpful to just see that, hey, we're not in this by ourselves. Nope, nobody's doing it right. There is no perfect parent. There is no perfect child. We are here to help grow these young humans and help them to be great human beings. So I think it's more helpful when we can just take a look back and say, hey, we're not in this by ourselves. It's okay. And like you said, being admitting when I'm wrong, when I failed, and say, hey, son, I'm not perfect. I want to be the dad
Hmm.
that you need, and I'm proud of you. I told you that I seen a reel one day that said, I think I just need to rehearse some things to my son that I don't normally, even when I'm frustrated. And this may be a tidbit for all of us. Even when we get frustrated with our kids, can you still go in their bedroom at nighttime and tell them, I'm proud of you?
Hmm.
Even though you didn't do what I asked you to do, we don't even have to say that, but I'm proud of you. I'm pleased with you. And being able to speak that over them every night so that they wake up with confidence. They wake up with joy and knowing that, hey, I might have done something. I might have messed up, but my dad, my mom still loves me. So, and they don't have to question that. So that's my last piece. Thank you,
Yeah,
bro.
so powerful. It wasn't until this moment that I actually realized, all four of us are transplants. None of us had family that are living in this state, and that's funny that we all are connected in some way, and that is amazing to me, one. Two, that acceptance of responsibility again is a driver. It's that one of those keys in a discipline, right? Like when we do that, when we model to our children that, hey man, I'm accepting some responsibility when I stepped out. It's not perfection. I'm not going back to that engineering person, that engineer model of parenting, in that in some ways, really in that engineering, it's those own insecurities that begin to keep us driving on our kids, maybe pushing too hard on our kids. Like you said, like, I'm not even letting him be who he is. And I know that there was a parent early on that said, hey, I have a child that has attention deficit, or ADHD and hypersensitive or hyperactivity disorder. And so here we have someone who's a child who automatically may not respond like what we would consider I don't even know what a normal child is, if I'm honest. I don't know if I've ever seen one. They're all weird, right? But the realities are that all of a sudden it's my insecurities that are making me want to hush my child or to change, like you said, that behavior. What is that, right? So it becomes this, like, how comfortable am I loving my child? And so much of our communities impact how we feel. It's something when you go at your own family, it's like it all hangs out, man. Nobody's policing anybody because it's your family. You know what I mean? It's like you can't change it even if you want to. But when we go out into public spaces, that seems to be where we might feel more of like, I've got to bear down on my children. And what does that tell our kids at the end of the day is that, Dad, you don't like who I am. I think my son felt that way a lot. That he didn't think Dad liked him because I was always trying to change it, you know. Um, touched a chord, sorry. Um, the realities though is that it does play in. It is a variable in the equation, how we feel in ourselves, how we feel in an environment. And sometimes I think again, coming from that idea of discipline, like how much do I know about me that I can work on me so that I can allow my son to be him or my daughter to be her, you know? Man, such good. I love you guys, man. I tell you what, it's so rich. I don't even, I don't have any other parting words other than to really say, if you're a parent listening, um, man, it's hard. um, find a good community of people that you can trust and talk to. Um, you know, if it feels hard, you're probably doing it right. If your kids tell you they hate you, you're probably doing a great job. um, know that I mean that sincerely. You know, I'd be surprised at how many parents I hear that are like, if my kid doesn't like me, I'm like, you're probably doing an okay job. And if like they tell me they hate me, I'm like, then you're doing a really good job. That's the reality is that we can't, our job as parents is not to be liked. Our job is to love our kids and what it takes to love. It's not a feeling, it's an action. It's protection all the time. It insists conscious choice and commitment. It is extremely difficult to be a parent and it's exhausting and we will fall short. It is a skill to be learned. And oftentimes over time, that's why I think grandparenting is it becomes you become a better parent at that point because you've done it for so long. You've learned a lot of things. So extend grace to yourself, extend grace to your kids, find a community of people that can support you, that hear you. These guys, every one of them, I've spent time with outside of work, and I've spent time sharing my worst self with them. I tell people my best self and worst self are about a second away from each other, and they pop up infrequently. So I want to encourage parents. I really do. I want to open it up too if people have questions that maybe myself, my panelists, anybody here. I put our information, our contact information on the screen. If there was something that was said or something either liked or not liked, we are adults. We care deeply about this field. If you want to contact us, please do so. You can do that individually if you want. Those emails will go right to us. Um, if you wanted to say thanks, you can do that as well. But that again, not necessary. If you want information, we would love to do it. If this has been helpful, and this is something that you would want us to do again, I think these men would be happy to go in and sit in another setting and do it again in front of a group of other people. So just know that we want to be not just helping this community, but if there's a community that you're a part of that you would find benefit in it, we would love to come and be a part of that as well. So I'm going to stop talking, and anybody else that wants to can.